welcome to Margaret Lewin Quilting. Today we're going to do a really quick video on how I square up a quilt once it comes off the long arm. So you can see I've got a quilt. This is obviously, I think, the back of it. That's the quilting design. And here's the front of it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up and I'm going to lay it out as flat as I can on my cutting table. All right, so here it is. It's getting all laid out. I'm going to pull out all the extra layers underneath because we used extra wide backing material on this one. Just scooch it down so that it's right underneath your view, because I want you to really see it. All right, so here's the quilt all laid out. I'm going to take my 12.5-inch ruler, which this is my Creative Grids one. And I think if you've been watching me for a while, you'll know that Creative Grids is my absolute favorite ruler. Now, along the edges here, you may or may not be able to see, there's a bunch of basting stitches. I normally don't remove those. I just leave them in there because they're going to go underneath the binding. If for some reason they come out from underneath the binding and you can see them, then I go ahead and pull them. And they are simply basting stitches, so you can just pull them right out. So I'm going to line this up. And do you see where I'm lining it? I'm going to try to straighten it just a little bit. All right, here we go. And you can see that I've got some extra fabric here. Well, that's mostly because the corner wasn't squared after she attached the borders on this, but it's okay. We've got it all under control. So I'm lining it up here and I'm lining it up here. And I am just gonna take my regular rotary cutter and I'm just gonna trim it right here. Trim, 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 all right? There's one corner done. All I'm doing are the 4 corners. I'll set my ruler aside. I'm going to rotate the quilt. And I'm going to lay it all out again. Get it nice and flat and nice and square. You know, I have a huge cutting table, but we quilters probably never have big enough spaces. I could always use a few more feet to my left, and I never have it. But that's okay. We make do with what we have. So here you can see these basting stitches right here. I think you can see the blue thread. So there's this one. I'm going to grab my ruler again. Excuse the view of the top of my nose. You probably don't care to see that, but that's the way it is. Now on this one, you can see what I'm doing again. I'm lining it up. I am double checking here and here just to make sure that it, you know, it looks pretty straight. And you can see I've got some extra fabric here this time. That's okay. I'm going to make this work. It'll be just fine when it gets done. All right, so I'm squaring it up. I'm using this line here. I'm using this line here just to make sure that I'm pretty straight with my borders too, so we can see them. And I'm again just gonna cut and cut. On this one I am gonna go backwards and cut this off only so that I don't have quite so much bulk. Okay, move my ruler again. Let's go side 3. All right. Here's side 3. Make sure all my fabric's out from underneath. And we've got the 12.5-inch ruler still. And I'm going to line it right up. I'm going to see where the best lineup is. I think that one's about my best. Now look at what I got going on here. This is a little bit of an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back it down a little bit, believe it or not. Let's see what we're doing here. You can see right here in this corner, it doesn't line up perfectly. And that's pretty normal. What you're kind of looking to do is just grab the best square lines that you possibly can, because it's not always perfect. And I'm trying to look between the longest space. So I'm checking from here all the way down to here. Then that way, if that corner got a little distorted, you're not taking that into account. You're taking a larger area. Okay? And that one looks pretty good. I'm going to see if I can scooch this back just a little bit more. Yeah, see, I'm lining up really well here. And I don't really want to lose that point. All right, here we go. We're going to square it up again. Okay, so there's the third corner. This is okay. That will be covered by the binding. And here comes corner number 4. Okay, so now I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm picking points on my quilt to make certain that I'm good and square. And here I'm going right along here. And here I'm using this one down here, making certain that I'm doing pretty good through there, and I do look good. So now here goes corner number 4. So that one's squared up. And again, we'll be okay with this because it will be hidden behind the binding. Time to switch rulers, okay? So now I'm gonna take my quilt. Well, let's try not to lose the rotary cutter. All right, I'm gonna take my quilt. I'm laying it out pretty flat, or as flat as I can. So we like nice flat spots. All right, cut it out. Making certain that I've only got this quilt's layer of fabric and none additional. Now I'm gonna take my second favorite ruler. This is my 24.5 by 8.5 inch ruler. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line it up here and here. And where I'm checking to make sure I'm square is here. See, I want about right there. And then here. Now we can see that we're not square through here. So I actually am going to make some slight adjustments to the quilt itself. Just kind of nudging it down a little bit. All right. So I've used this edge, I've used this edge, and I've used this edge just to keep it visually square. And I'm going to trim. Okay. Whoops. Got a couple extra threads I didn't get there. Now I'm going to slide this down. And I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to check this line. If you see here, I've got extra. So I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on the ruler. I'm just going to nudge this up a little bit and see what it looks like. Look, I've got this is really good and square. This is not. So what that means is there's a little bit of a curve here. You're never going to know it. You're never going to see it. Okay? So I'm going to use just this line and this line to trim it up. So I'm going to, again, grab my ruler and I've squared it up. All right. Now this is going to be my last cut on this side. So again, grab my ruler. Lay it down. Make sure I'm doing pretty good. I'm gonna make an adjustment there. I'll make an adjustment there. All right, here we go. Now, if you see here, look at, we're really not very close here. So I'm going to try to do what I can to keep it as close as possible. Okay, I'm going to trim this off. All right, now I'm going to take it and I'm going to do from here. I'm going to follow my line down to where I can start to gradually take it so that it okay, see, now I'm good. I can just trim that little bit. And there we go. Now it is nice and square and flat. All right. I'm going to rotate it and I'm going to do it again. Here comes our next one. There we go. I'm going to take that one beyond. Okay, keeping it right there. We're lined up really well here. We're great here this time. So I'm just going to trim it. All right, so I'm lining it up again. Let's shove it down a little bit more. Okay. Let's go right up to here. And we'll line up right here. All the way down. A little bit here. We can move it down. Okay, so I'm using that border. There we go. Now I'm going to do one more cut on this side. Right there. Again, I lined up there. Just squeezing down just a little bit closer. Here we go. So there's two sides of it all squared up. Now let's move on to another side. Here we go. Move this. All right. Lining it up right here. Here we go. This is a nice one. Not much to mess with on that side. Here we go. All right. Let's roll it up. Alrighty. So there we are here. We're good there. Let's bring it down a little bit. Okay. Right there too. All right. And again, yes, we've got a little extra here, but it'll be covered up by the binding, which is just fine. Okay. Here we go again. This I probably should have cut off and I didn't, just because it makes it a little bit easier to lay flat. Let's see what we can do on this side. Here we go. All right, let's see. We can scooch this up a little bit. Here we go. There. One more side. And then we have managed to square up this quilt, and it is then ready for the binding to go on. Let's lay that in front of you so you can see what I'm doing again. We want our quilt laying flat. That's what's really important here. If it's flat, then you've got a better chance of it coming out nicely. If it's not flat, you do run a risk. See, I put my hand on this and then I kind of move it around a little bit, only because my hand steadies the ruler. And we're not bad again. Here we go. I've got quite this mess in front of me with all this fabric. All right. And again, lining it up. Time we're good on the first shot. And now here's the very last cut. Again, you see me moving it around because I want it to lay nice and flat. And I'm going to line my ruler up. And I'm going to line my ruler up as best as I can. And I'm having a little bit of an issue here. See, it's not big enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it down. Take this one up to here. And I'll take this one down. I'm just gonna mess with it just a little bit. There we go. Last cut. And we now have a squared up quilt. Oop, an extra thread there. And that is how you go about squaring up a quilt. So now it's time to get that binding on. The first thing I'm going to do, the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to square up the quilt corners. Because once we square up the quilt corners, it makes it really easy to square up the rest of the quilt. So what I do is whenever there's a border on a quilt, I use that border to help me square up. But here's a quilt with no border, and I'm going to show you how to square that one up. Then I'll show you how to square up one that has a border. Okay? So my first thing is I'm just lining it up at the corner. And I'm going to take my rotary blade and I'm just going to cut it right at the corner. Okay? So there's cut one. I'm going to rotate the quilt to the next corner. Here's my next one. It's really important when you do this to make sure that the quilt is good and flat and there's nothing underneath it, because it's really easy to have a quilt and very easily get a piece of the fabric underneath there and another part of the quilt, and you can get all kinds of trouble. Just not good. Here you can see I've got a little bit of quilting outside. That's fine. I'm just gonna take it, finding my edges, and just, now on this one I can go from corner to corner, looking to make sure that I'm pretty square. And let me, there, now I am. And then I just trim. And trim again. Now on this one, I'm gonna bring back my piece and I'm just gonna cut that right off so that it's easier to work with. I'm gonna rotate it. Again, checking to make sure that I don't have anything underneath that quilt and it's all good and flat. I don't have any folds or anything like that that I could cut through a wrong layer. Lay it out. Okay. Grab my ruler. and just using my ruler, square it up. And the 12.5-inch ruler is a great size ruler to do this with because usually you can at least get across a full block, and that helps when you're squaring it up. Okay. And rotate it again. Here's my next corner. Pull out my ruler. Let's smooth this right out. And again, here's basting stitches, this dark green thread. Those are just basting stitches that hold the quilt, the batting, and the backing together on the long arm. Those are fine to leave on there. They're also fine to take off, whatever you want to do. But they can either stay on or they can go off. Doesn't matter. It's up to you. Usually the binding hides them. If the binding doesn't hide them, then I do take them off. Okay. I missed a little bit here. There we go. Okay. And that is all 4 of my sides. So I'm going to put away my 12.5-inch ruler, and I'm going to grab my bigger one. So now I've got a nice big long one. And what this one does is the same thing, because you've got such length, you just have more space to square it with. I'm going to line it up. You can see that right here we've got a block that didn't match perfectly up. So we need to make adjustments for that. And see, now look how square that is, going right on down. Now I'm just going to start squaring up the sides, holding it down. There we go. Nice and square, nice and straight. And here's our next one. This quilt, the pattern is called Lion's Quilt, and this is a quilt that my daughter made. So I know she doesn't care if I square it up for her. In fact, she'll probably be happy. So here we go. Just laying it across to make sure that I'm good and square. And yes, you can see I've got fabric here, but again, this is an area where where they didn't quite match up perfectly, and that's okay. It'll be fine. All right, and here we go again. Last cut on that side. Now I'm rotating it, again, laying it just as flat as I can get it. All right. And there we go. I'm lining it up, making sure that I'm good and flat. I'm going to try squeezing that down just a little bit. There. One of the things that make it so easy to square up this quilt is that when Lindsay made it, I know she squared up every single block along the way. So that really does help, because the quilt itself is pretty square when you go to do your last squaring up. Now my last little trim here on this side. There's that one. Well, we got 2 more sides to go. Almost there. The hardest thing about squaring a quilt up is wrestling with all of that fabric, because you know they're quite big, so you just That's hard. That's really tough. All right, I'm gonna get my line going here. I'm gonna make sure that this one's quite right. Let's see. We can bring it down a little bit. There we go. And you can see is all I'm doing is just taking the part of the quilt that was already flat and squared before it was put on the long arm and just really trimming it off. Here we go. Again, make sure that all of your excess pieces are out of there. You want a good view of everything. You want to make sure that it's nice and flat. I'm gonna adjust this way a little bit. Just a little bit more. There we go. A little bit better. Are we good? Yeah. And see, you can always check yourself here too, because you've got a little border there to follow. So there's another piece done. And one more time around. Last side. My cutter. And move my ruler. Make sure that I'm flat. Okay. That looks good. Just gonna trim that. Move my ruler down. Here we go. Almost there. All right, let's see where we're at. Let's nudge this down a little bit. Whoop. There we go. Now it's nudging the way I want it to. Sometimes it needs the pressure from your hands and from the ruler to be able to really get it to lay flat like you want it to. Here we go. All right. And now our last one. We're going to try to get the biggest expanse to get it the straightest. And on this one, I'm going to be nudging it down just a little bit. I can see it now. So I'm just going to hold it and just picking up the back of the quilt, just kind of moving it down. And I'm putting pressure here so that it doesn't move where I don't want it to. And that one's good, believe it or not. I didn't think it was going to be. There we go. Put my ruler away. Lock my rotary blade. And here is the second quilt all squared up. So now I am ready to go attach the binding, which I'm actually going to be leaving for Lindsay to do. Thank you so much for joining me. If you would like to make Lion's quilt, you can find the instructions for cutting the fabric on our Facebook group, which is Margaret Lewin Quilting. And all of the instructions on how to make it are right here on my YouTube channel, and I'll put a link for it. See you again really soon. I hope you're having a great day. Bye.